Hello and welcome to Sydney Modern Apps for June 2023. Tonight we will be joined by Matthew Robbins. Matthew is a long-time mobile developer specialising in Xamarin and .NET MAUI. He's the author of MFractor, which is a popular Xamarin productivity tool. And in this talk, Matthew's going to dive into his new desktop developer tool, Ansight, and how it's built using .NET MAUI. This session is going to cover what Ansight is and the problems it was built to solve, the pain and joy of migrating a Xamarin.Forms app to .NET MAUI, including the key lessons learned, the architecture and frameworks used to construct a MAUI desktop app with high code share, and the innumerable problems encountered and solved when building a real-time app in .NET MAUI. Before we get stuck in, I'll introduce myself. I'm Sam Sutherland. I'm the Technical Director at Xam Consulting, and you can find my LinkedIn page via samsutherland.com. This edition of Modern Apps is organised by Xam Consulting. Xam make people's lives better by solving real problems through the intelligent application of technology. We're always looking for people to work with us, so please reach out and give me a shout. News this month, iOS 17 beta is released on the 5th of June. What that means and how that relates to this month's topic is that iOS 17 is the first version of iOS that will not support Xamarin.Forms applications. So if you have a Xamarin.Forms app, it would be a good time now to test it against iOS 17, because if there are any issues, you aren't going to be able to resolve those with Xamarin, and you will need to upgrade to MAUI. Now, MAUI is out of support by May next year, and that's around the time you will no longer be able to upload iOS 16 apps to the App Store. So it's a good idea. You will have to, by that point, have migrated to .NET MAUI. But if your app is not going to work with iOS 17, then you're going to need to do that sooner, because iOS 17 will be with us in September. And by October, around a month later, more users will be using that than iOS 16. So a good time to check, good idea to check now and make sure that your app still works. If it doesn't, you've got a bit less time than you would have normally. So let me swiftly hand over to Matt, introducing his session.
It does. And then the second part is my experiences using MAUI in Ansight, so the actual engineering aspect of it. So the migration from Xamarin.Forms to MAUI, some of the things that I think are really good, some of the things that are not quite so good and gave me some grief, or are giving me grief in other projects. So first of all, a bit of an introduction to Ansight. So why Ansight? What problems it actually solve? So it's probably familiar to a lot of you. You've got me as a software engineer and a software tester, and you have this conversation. Your tester goes, "Hey Matt, I found a horrible bug." The question is, okay, that's great. Let's figure out what went wrong. So what happened? What are you doing? All that stuff that's necessary to generate a bug report. Often it's, I don't remember what I did. Okay, the app's broken. Okay, we've got telemetry. It's fine. We'll figure it out. So what device are you using? What app version were you using? What user were you using? And then the response is, I don't remember. How do I find that? So apologies if I'm triggering you. And then the general reaction from me is this. Yeah, so I dislike this conversation. I've had it so much over the past 10 years, and I have more or less just, I'm sick of it. So I've been building a tool to make that not happen. So basically, bugs, they're hard to capture. So once someone finds a bug and you have to capture some information. So the device logs, the screen recording, the app details, so the version and whatnot, the user details, telemetry for the app. Often they're hard to reproduce, so we go down a rabbit hole talking about what you did, how to reproduce it. They spend half a morning, you spend half a morning trying to figure out what went wrong. And then when you do figure out what went wrong, so the tester might be talking about a screen as the task screen, but in your head, because of the source code, is the job screen. And so you have to reconcile that communication difference. So something that was initially, oh, the app's broken, that was the initial conversation, turned into a 4-hour dialogue one morning, trying to figure out what went wrong. So there's some ways to work around this, of course. There's lots of things for capturing testing sessions. I kind of break them down into 2 categories. So one is developer tools. So they're high fidelity. By fidelity, I mean the information they capture, but they're also highly complex in terms of use. So a developer tool like ADB, Android Studio, Writer might capture profiling information, ADB logs, maybe get screen recordings like UI dumps, but they require technical developer tools to use. And not that it's outside the bounds of testers to use them, but they're not easy to use. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got analytics-based tools. So you've got Mixpanel, Raygun, Application Insights, like that web-based suite of tools that connect into your application and collect events and then upload it to the web. Super easy to browse, but they don't give you huge amounts of information. So if you wanted a screen recording, often these tools don't do that. If you wanted full system logs, they don't do that. So ideally, what I'm after as a developer is that sweet spot. So I want the full diagnostic level tooling, so full diagnostic level information that tools like ADB and Android Studio give me, but I want it to be easy to use for the tester who's doing the testing. So low complexity but high fidelity data. Which brings us to Ansight. So it's a session capture tool for testing Android apps. So it's standalone. It's a Mac OS app. No Android Studio needed, nothing. Just install it. If you turn on developer mode on a device, it's just plug and play. So it connects straight to the device, screen recording, device logs, everything. You don't need to add anything to your app. You don't need to do any SDKs, no apps installed on the phone. It just siphons everything off the phone using the ADB toolchain. And it captures pretty much everything on the phone. So logs, screen recording, app telemetry, app data, device properties, basically everything that you would want to do more or less like a forensic analysis of an app. Yeah, so what's captured? Screen recording, so video of the session without needing to use something like, what's the tool, for example, like Visor. So you don't need an app on the phone. All the ADB logs, the device and application details, that includes process IDs. And if you've targeted an application, it's memory, CPU, and rendering statistics throughout the whole lifetime of that app process. And that's all in a single replayable bundle. So now, ideally, the conversation becomes, "Hey, Matt, I found a horrible bug," and I'm like, "Oh God, what have they found?" And then they go, "Oh, here's the screen recording and logs and performance data and everything," and they give me this lovely ANS file called Kaboom, and then I love it. It's good. So yeah, this is the dream world that I'm trying to kind of get to. Yeah, and I'm using this quite a lot at the moment with a client, and it's proving really, really helpful. Yeah, so the goal of it is talk about solving the problem, not how to replicate it. So it's all about communication. Let's talk about how to fix it, not spend hours figuring out what you actually did. So how does MAUI apply to the engineering of this tool? Well, first of all, why MAUI? Well, I mean, many reasons. First, C#.NET, amazing language, amazing tool chain. It's high performance, it's battle tested, it's been for ages, it works really well. MAUI let me build two native desktop apps. So one for Mac OS X, which is based on Mac Catalyst, and one for Windows based on WinUI. I'm a Xamarin.Forms developer. I'm a Xamarin developer, so all of my skill sets in that. So it made sense to just build this tool in the Xamarin tech stack. So using my existing skill set. And a big thing for MAUI for me was that the backend for Windows is WinUI. It's not UWP. If you've worked with the UWP apps before, you can't use the file, like the file dot, open read, open write operations. You can't reach outside the sandbox. So WinUI doesn't have that restriction, which means that the cross-platform file IO code that you're writing is actually cross-platform. So this was the big thing that I was waiting for before doing the MAUI port. In terms of how Ansight's built, there's a couple of different layers. There's the UI layer. So the main technologies I'm using for UI, apart from XAML, SkiSharp for some graphical rendering, Community Toolkit for pop-ups, and then some specific high-performance controls that I've written with UIKit, and I'm writing for WinUI. Then beneath that is, I guess, like all of the application. So, 30 and property change for the model view model layer. For talking to these guys, so the Android phones, ADB for all communications, and then a handy little tool called Screen Copy for doing the video streaming from the device, and then OpenCV and FFmpeg for doing the receiving and decoding. And this is all accessible in .NET. Wasn't super hard to do. Then SQLite, Newtonsoft, and System.io for all the data operations. So deserializing to JSON, writing to a SQLite database, writing out files. And something a bit different that I know not really many people do is I don't use the IOC containers in like the MAUI builders. Like I don't use AutoFac or the built-in stuff. So I prefer the MEF, Managed Extensibility Framework. There's a bunch of reasons for that. One is that I took a lot of my original source code from my other products, MFractor. Another one is that I find it's a lot easier to use than other IC containers, but it's definitely not a commonly done thing. So with all that aside, I'm only really talking about this MAUI part tonight. So how does MAUI kind of fit into the UI layer? Because everything else that was portable. I didn't have to really do any work to make that work. So because it was originally a Xamarin.Forms app when I started it, what did the migration look like from Forms to MAUI? So like what were the steps? I found there was really like 3 steps and different in complexity. So first one was the actual project migration. So that was the collapsing of your portable class library and your 2 application heads into one project. That's not super hard to do. That's more or less just like moving files around. The next ones in the actual project migration step started to get a bit trickier. So moving images. For me, that was basically taking all the XXX HDPI ones from Android and putting them into the MAUI image folder. Fonts, which is actually easier to use, they're much easier to use in MAUI. App icons are much easier to use in MAUI as well. So like that resource step, so bringing all your resources into one common location. And I think MAUI does a really, really good job of making this pretty simple. It's more or less just drop it in a folder. And then the next step in the first pass was the actual UI migration. So for me, it's really just a global find and replace on the XML namespace. So that /forms URI. And honestly, it mostly just worked for me. So there wasn't really anything I had to do there. I disabled some of my custom controls because I knew they just didn't work. But once I actually started the app, it was pretty okay, just missing a lot of features that I'd written in custom controls. The next step was a little harder. That's, I guess, the native UI or the native project migration. So things like I had a couple of custom controls. So I had a log viewer that streams in ADB logs. and renders them in real time. Tried to write it in MAUI. It really just didn't perform. It was just frozen basically. So that had to get rewritten from AppKit, which was NS table view, into UIKit, and the same thing with the property table. Basically, this step will be the same for you if you do it. If you have custom renderers, they'll need to go from renderers to handlers. So it's not super scary. Handlers are actually a lot nicer. They're much simpler, but you do have to do a bit of a rewrite there. Yeah, and then I found the actual like native services. For instance, I had open file, open folder dialogues specifically written for Mac. I had to rewrite all of that as well. So anything that was like natively written for Mac that wasn't supported in UIKit, I had to rewrite it, which was, yeah, wasn't super happy with, but whatever. That's the part of the process. Then the last one is, yeah, test and polish. So just checking that it's all working properly, fixing lots and lots of little things, testing some more. So all of the like native rewrites that I did, had to re-implement all that lovely behavior that I spent a year working on, a year part-time working on, and just like fixing lots of little paper cuts, and then just keep testing. So things like menu bindings didn't work, so I had to like decide how to change behavior and drop custom controls and drop integrations and move away from things that I wanted to do because there was MAUI problems that I couldn't get around at that point in time. So yeah, last part is just heaps of testing basically. I did this start of the year, like over summer. For me, it was pretty quick because I started building Ansight with the knowledge that I would have to do this, and I actually tried to build it in MAUI originally and it didn't work. So I got the core of the app done in Xamarin.Forms and then did the migration. First part, like the actual project migration, took 2 weeks. I was doing it part-time. Like I'd sink in a 4-hour morning occasionally. The next part, which was the native UI migration, so doing the services rewrites, the log viewer rewrites, all of my native controls, that took quite a bit longer. Again, it was part-time. I was doing a lot of paid work at the time. So that was about 4 weeks. And then it's not really correct, but like one week for testing and polishing. But really during that 4 weeks, I was also doing it as well. So I was just finding heaps of little things. And yeah, as I said before, all of that effort for me was part-time. And this was a very smooth migration in my experience. So what is great about it? What did I love about MAUI? So what's been some really good things that have come out of it? I absolutely love the single project structure. It's awesome. You can still use all of your native components. So you can use, native Android splash screens. You can go into the actual platform depth. It just happens in these folders. Well, it doesn't actually. You can do it wherever you want. There's IFDEFs for it. But this single project is awesome. If you've done app icon generation, it's an absolute swear word. Yeah. So MAUI's now give it an image and it generates it for everything. Yeah, I've one of the tools that I wrote for MFractor was to do this generation for all the platforms. So it's really nice that it's now just part of the MSBuild. Yeah, I love this. Custom fonts. If you've used custom fonts in Xamarin.Forms, it's painful. Now you put the font in the fonts folder, you give it a build action of MAUI font, and in the app builder, you just say map this font to this name, and that's it. MAUI just seems to do the rest of it, which is, yeah, awesome. Very magic. Yeah, it's actually a lot simpler to, I think, reference the fonts as well. I think it's either a static resource or just like this name that you give it. So it would be like font family equals material icons. So yeah, a lot nicer. This thing, I absolutely love this. So being able to do per platform IFDEFs at any point in your shared project. So in your in your project. So if you need to do some branching logic based on platform, you don't need to make an interface and then dependency inject it anymore. You just straight out reroute to whatever platform you want to do. So for instance, this is me finding the link of a video. This isn't implemented on Windows yet, but that's okay. Yeah, literally just IFDEF Mac Catalyst, use the the AppKit, use the UIKit library, and then you can implement it for other things. So you get one file rather than like a couple to do platform specific behavior. Another thing that's really awesome is you can do platform conditionals inside your MSBuild. So if you want to include or exclude entire like asset groups, this is a way you can do it. I'm doing, so this particular way, or this particular code snippet is doing an import for the OpenCV dependencies, but only the Mac OpenCV import dependencies. And that'll just bundle all of it into the app bundle. So it's really handy that you can do this like whole string of custom logic inside your MSBuild. App theming is super simple to do. So here, subscribing to the notification for when the operating system's theme changes, and then just applying it basically. So this requested theme will be like light mode or dark mode, like light or dark. And then I've got some logic in the app that'll just switch everything in and out. Yeah, and that works in real time. So if you do a swap, so if I went from light theme, which I'm on at the moment, I went to dark theme, you get this notification in the app to do the change. Yeah, that's really nice. Handlers are way simpler to use than renderers. They're also a lot like flatter in terms of code. So rather than having lots of overrides and declaring exports and whatnot, you're doing mapping code. So you have a dictionary of property names to their mapping functions. Yeah, so when that changes, it directly calls that function. So that's much simpler code base wise. And this platform view up here, that is an IFDEF that I've defined at the top of this particular class file. So basically everything for the behavior for this log entry table, it doesn't require multiple files per se. You just IFDEF based on the platform. So I really like this. Another thing that is amazing is if you've ever had to try to reach from a virtual Xamarin.Forms control to its native counterpart. So like if you had a button and you wanted to get the Apple, like the iOS version of the button, it wasn't doable unless you kind of cracked open the reflection tools, and it was just painful basically. Whereas this, you get direct access to any of the platform views as you want. This is really cool because it means whenever like the handler is initialized for your virtual control, you can peek into the Windows view, the Android view, the iOS view, the Mac view, and do a per platform customization on it. I've got an example of that. I'll show you in a second. But it's powerful because it means things like effects and renderers, you don't have to make them because you can just do this inline in the code. So it's much simpler. Another thing that I have, admittedly, I did complain about tonight, but I do really like is Mac Catalyst. So being able to use your like iOS chops, like your iOS programming chops, to just write Mac UI. So all of this code here is some of the stuff from my log viewer, but that's all now. It would just work on iOS. So it's nice having that like common coding platform. Some of the challenges. So some things that were not so amazing, and chances are if you're doing this, you'll probably come across these problems too. Third-party controls. This seems to be the main stopping point. And I'm definitely experiencing this on 2 apps that I'm working on at the moment. Many of the core libraries that you might be using in Xamarin.Forms they're either not supported because people just aren't maintaining them anymore, or they're still like lagging behind, playing catch up. So 3 that immediately come to mind, and you may have heard me point these 3 out tonight. FF image loading, because it's just so widely used. That hasn't had a commit in 4 years, so that's a little concerning. We're trying to find ways around it at the moment. RG pop-ups, same thing, that hasn't been touched in a while. But this one is, you can work around it by just switching to the community toolkit pop-ups. It's more or less the same thing. It's very simple. And then Syncfusion, which is like they're a really big control vendor. They're quite a bit behind. Most of the core stuff is, but there's a couple of things that we're blocked on. So yeah, kind of frustrating. We've been solving it. So for Ansight, I was solving it by either rewriting things, dropping controls, or moving to other vendors. In the most part, that strategy should be okay. You should be able to do it that way. Platform-specific bugs. I don't know how prevalent this is going to be on Android and iOS, but I'm doing a Mac app and a Windows app, and they're given that the legacy of Xamarin.Forms is mostly mobile, and this is kind of like a newer thing for them. I'm hitting a couple of them. It's okay. I found ways around it, but just bear in mind you may hit these as you're doing it. Probably less pronounced on Android and iOS though. If you're using OpenGL, so specifically if you're using the Scare Sharp OpenGL view, that is a no-go. So from what I understand, OpenGL, the dream of a cross-platform hardware accelerated library, doesn't seem to have lived up. It seems to have kind of passed its use by date. So now I have Metal on iOS and DirectX and a bunch of other things. So that's deprecated. Doesn't work. So that, for me, that really sucked, because I was using Scare Sharp to do tons of like customized charting, and also like decoding and rendering video frames. And so not having that happen on the graphics card it's a lot slower. It's still real time, but it's 5 times the speed. So 5 times the time it could take if it was on the GPU. So that's unfortunate, but it was fine. Could work around it. And this is just a very specific desktop one, but AppKit isn't accessible. So that's the Mac OS specific UI framework, and I had a lot of stuff written in this, and it just didn't exist. So that triggered a rewrite of a few things that took a lot of work to build in the first place. So unless you're using the Mac OS library APIs, you probably don't need to worry about that. That's just me having an event. Then there's also a bunch of like application-specific challenges that happened before the migration and after the migration. So just like some really tricky problems in actually building this tool. So one is getting OpenCV and FFmpeg to be on people's computers. So I had to write a custom build task in a command line tool that sucked in and rewired a bunch of DY libs. So that was a lot of work. There was like a year or so worth of figuring out how to make this happen. This is probably the main thing that blocked me from releasing this to the public. Then another thing, which I love .NET that I could do this, but decoding incoming video frames from GBR, a certain color format, and then it comes in as a 24-bit color format, and I needed it in the 32-bit color format to render, but like in a different byte order. So a lot of like pointer arithmetic. So this was painful, but I really loved that I could kind of go into this like raw to the metal code in .NET to do it. This is another thing that once it was cracked, it was like one of the last things that really meant I could show the tool to people. So yeah. Yeah, and the last thing was streaming, you know, a couple hundred logs from a phone a second and then getting it to render. Turns out, yeah, like UI controls just don't like that. So getting that to perform properly and not just be a constantly frozen UI was pretty hard. But being able to drop down into the native UI controls. So in this case, being able to write a custom table view from scratch in an iOS manner, that really solved this problem. So yeah, .NET allow me to do that is awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'm going to show. That's the wrong one. So pretty straightforward and not really. There's not much to show, but yeah, I've got an Android phone, and this has the developer mode turned on. So you just plug the phone in, and it connects straight to it. Starts streaming the screen, grabbing logs. So as I work around, you'll see, yeah, the logs change, the screen's changed. If I go into an app, so this is an app I've been running some testing on, I can target it. So this starts recording telemetry for that particular app. So in this case, well, it's graphics, memory, and CPU usage. And as I use the app, it's capturing the incoming events. And if I wanted to make, if I was doing a testing session and I wanted to grab a recording of this to share with someone, you can hit record. And then as I do things, that screen's a bit lagging out behind a bit. And then stop recording. Yep, the demo guys don't like me tonight. It's fine, it's meant to show that. It's funny how you're pretty much guaranteed to have a problem once you show it to someone. Been working fine all day. All right, anyway. Here's one I prepared earlier. So you end up with this, this nice recording bundle with oh my God, come on. Where you can filter the logs and you can kind of scan through. If I wanted to see what caused a spike in CPU usage here, you can kind of go into the associated log event and start seeing what was happening behavior-wise in the log viewer and also what was happening on screen at the same time. Yeah, so basically, if a tester captures this and then sends it to you, you can, rather than having to trawl through logs or a screen recording, you can view all of that information correlated together. So I've been finding this super handy. I've been doing like Bluetooth integrations. So if something doesn't work, the tester can grab a capture of this, and then I can go into the underlying BLE logs. I mean, nothing's happening here, but yeah, you get the idea. So yeah, just very, for me, it's been super, super useful. So yeah. And that is Ansight. Any questions? What's up?
A question about the logs that was generated. So if I understand it correctly, hypothetically the tester will get to record the screen via phone, and then there will be a file that was being generated or Ansight. Right?
Yes.
Does it contain everything, the logs, the video,
Yep.
screen recording, and everything? So now my question is the log similar to the the normal Android logs that was being generated, or it's different?
Yeah. So I'll just repeat the question. So the question was, I'm on it. Is it the same logs as the Android system logs that you get from ADB?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So all of this happens through the Android debug bridge. So that's the logcat logs. So see if I can find it. It records all of it into a single database. So how do I do this again? Library. I could just export it actually. I can export it. What am I doing? I wrote this for this exact reason. Ay. Matthew Robbins. Or are you not working in this version? It's not working in this version. That's all right. So internally, it's just an archive with a manifest that describes what it recorded, some videos. So that's just a full video of like what you're seeing. And then in terms of the logs you're asking about, so SQLite database, you could theoretically pull this apart yourself with your own tools and then extract it and run analysis if you wanted to. But yeah, just that's the entirety of the ADB logs for this particular recording. It's everything. Yeah. There is, I don't know if this particular file has its camera stuck. That would be this one. With archive utility. So this one in the manifest, because it was targeted to a specific app, it has the process of the ID of the app you chose. So there is a capability to just show the logs for the app that you want to see. But yeah, in terms of like what it looks like, I'm gonna just restart that because I feel like that didn't work. Come on, what are you doing? What are you doing? All right, there we go. Yeah, so just all three tables. Displays. So if your video display comes on and off, each of the video streams recorded, all the ADB logs, and then all the telemetry sampling that it did. So that you just end up with this, right? So that's the 12,500 ADB logs that came through for that session. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any more?
That's a question, but that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've been working on that for a while. It started because I just had tons of backwards and forwards with testers. It's kind of like, yeah, they're struggling to build. Well, they're struggling to do ADB log captures and then get a screen recording, and there's nothing that meant I could collate it all together and then also get performance data. So yeah, I kind of cracked it and spent 2 years writing it. It's all. So yeah.
I saw when you were scrolling through the CPU and memory usage, the log was scrolling and video was going.
Yeah.
You can do that in you can scroll a log.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can not this version. I'll see if it'll start. But yeah, you can pick a log and it will scan to the point in the video and in the performance data. And you can also pick the next version. It's just not quite ready yet, but you could pick a point in the performance data and it will zero in on the log that happened at that point in time as well, or the nearest enough. So yeah, and likewise the video, you could go to the video and it will scan to the point in the telemetry data and the logs that occurred at that time. So yeah, looking to also like continue on expanding that. So like, you know, take a selection of logs around an event or a memory spike or something. So yeah, it's not like me.
It's not just for testing purposes, it's for performance tuning as well.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the original vision was testing and communication, and that's kind of where I'm aiming for it to go. But yeah, it's super useful for performance diagnosis. Yeah, the one thing is you do need to have a reasonable level of logs in your application itself. Like it's not like Mixpanel, which injects into all the buttons and stuff. So you do have to have a little bit of work done before you use it, but yeah.
When you upgraded, did you consider or look into using the .NET upgrade tool?
I didn't consider using the upgrade tool, no. I'm honestly not sure why. Maybe it was a lack of awareness. I also knew like it was pretty simple for me to do. So
yeah, it wasn't available at the start. It's something that reasonably recently.
Yeah.
So you may have done it right.
Yeah, so I did this in like January, February. So maybe it was around, but yeah, I think I was just in my own world, just getting things done. So. Ansight for this? No. The reason being we're using a lot of shared projects for like sharing code. Yeah, I know that shared projects aren't really in fashion, so maybe I'm overly skeptical that the tool's gonna be able to handle it. I should actually just try it and see what happens. So, yeah. Cool. All right.
Cool. Thank you very much, Matt.
No problem. Thank you.